while the majority of the contaminated material has been removed, this is not yet a clean environment. We are still wearing masks and to protect ourselves from any of the harmful effects of this mold. Kevin, would you tell us what your observations were when you first came over to this home to do the inspection for the DaCostas?
Let me start out initially. A lot has changed since I've been here. Again, our initial is always a visual inspection, and when we first came downstairs, I was a little concerned. I did see on the south wall over there, I did see some mold microbial growth occurring, and immediately at that point, as we are now, we masked up for our own safety as we take this really seriously. The inspection itself, as I mentioned before, is always on a visual note. But we do other things and use other tools to help us determine, well, what is the cause here? What's going on? One of the things we first noticed in this is that there was a lot of humidity. So the first indication of what we would do is use our hygrometer and check perhaps both on both scales. Relative humidity scale and the absolute humidity scale. And I'll tell you what, if I remember right, the relative humidity seemed to be somewhere in the 70s, and I did bring my report here, so if you care to, if I can put it in some light, even though we're a little subdued here, I will show you that. And it was interesting in the fact that that should give us some clues of what's going on immediately, that there is enough moisture, as we say, to support microbial growth. I don't know if you can get that in the camera, but that is actually reading a relative humidity at 72+%. That's excessive. Now, one of the other things we did, and here is, I do believe we switched that mode to absolute humidity, and we did do some measuring. And I'm going to do it from recollection. The radiometric temp gun was finding some areas that were very close to those dew points. And one of the things, if you can kind of pan in this area, was the Dowex for the water softener, and then even some of these pipes, any water-using devices, you could actually see the moisture on it and mold and microbial growth beginning. So right then and there was a big concern for us. One of the next steps we did is to use the moisture meter. Like doctors wear a stethoscope, we in the inspection business wear the moisture meter. And our biggest concern was the south wall. If you could still focus in on this, there's enough light as we walk down here. The biggest concern that we saw right away of evidence was this area. We proceeded to do digital visual a picture so we could record that. We did moisture meter readings. As we scan the moisture meter from this area, we always do it comparative-wise. We want to try to compare, do we know dry areas? Would it make sense to go higher or on an inside wall away from an outside wall? We began getting a value that there was still moisture down there. As we went closer to the bottom, the moisture went redline. It started warning there's considerable moisture. Well, and with that, we decided, well, since we can see visible mold, and the moisture meter's reading it, and we have some more quantifying evidence because we have an awful lot of humidity, let's do one other thing. And that was, we decided to do some thermal imaging. And in the thermal image, we saw a lot of anomalous areas, all in here. And one of the clues that gives me something occurred prior. It could have been an event, not just from over-humidification, letting the basement be very damp. I would say this probably had something to do with flooding. It's called wicking up. And what happens if there's enough flood water here, the anomalies, is just another word for something unusual in the picture, showed areas amorphous shaped, sort of like this, up and down. And that's usually indicative of moisture being literally sucked up the drywall. How did that occur? Well, if it's occurring over all this whole area, I don't think in any way, shape, or form, you could have had enough humidity, even with hygrometer readings at that point, to cause that. It had to be caused by another external force, such as, it could be seepage, flood, or a combination of all of them. If you ask me my honest professional opinion, I would say that there had to be some flooding event down here. And one other thing brought it to mind, and if you could still, there's still some remains left, not much, but whoops, this pool table on the legs, I do remember something, and we did do that. We did take some documentation. We'll try to show you that if we can zoom in on it just a bit. But on the legs, you can see water lines, and there was a lot of mold growing on there. So our concern was, whoa, there's some mold issues. Now another thing I just came across is after all the remediation has exposed this, is there is considerable amount of rust. You can see where I'm showing it. Down from this point to right about here, considerable amount of rust. It starts getting a little bit less here. And then to this point, normally how it should look without rust. Again, ours was a visual at the time. We don't take apart the aesthetics there, the enclosures of the lolly columns such as this. So we don't know what's in there, but this is a good indication when I see all this. There must have been a flood in there, because I will also make one other remark. In one of the pictures we did take in recording this, there's a lot of mold on the wood trim that was around this. It's another indication something's going on. If you kind of follow me through this, the construction time, this is what I'm talking about, the Dowicks and on the water softener. That's all mold, and a lot of moisture, excessive humidity and dew points. This is what I was talking about. That same post that I was showing you, there's mold growing down there. This was the enclosure. Now it's gone. There is where we found the initial spottings of mold. There's no doubt that's mold growing. That's this typical signature. This is what I'm talking about. Why would there be? If you look at, there's a little shadow line here. It might not be very clear, but on the original digital photograph, you can clearly see some sort of line in there. This gives you a little better indication. There's, when we quantify what's going on, as I read lower, look at this. It is showing us red line. It's the comparative value, we always do it on a lower scale, is at a plus 100%. Excessive moisture. Going to some of the anomalous areas, you can actually see this. We outlined it with the black bracketing here. This is the same wall. The mold is actually growing where I'm pointing. I don't know if the camera will pick this up in a very deeper azul blue color. That is the moisture that's been inside the wall. And as we wrote, this is a typical anomaly, typical of moisture wicking up drywall. In kind of a close, I'm glad that the folks decided to go with remediation. We did suggest proper remediation protocol be executed to do this. I had one other clue, and I'll close with that. If you can kind of pan with me, it was in this closet area. One thing that struck me, that there is definitely a problem. I had opened this door, and in one of those stud pockets down there, the inside of the back side of the drywall, it's just so much prolific microbial mold growth occurring on it. It was scary. So I was very concerned that with the levels of moisture of what we found evident in the wall, the readings of all the instruments we used, I was very concerned there could be some toxic levels. As we know, it takes about 55 to 60% constant chronic humidity or moisture content for that type of mold to occur, and all the indices point to that. That's about it for my comments.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin.